Let's DIY some 2021 trends using stuff I have at home. It's Christina from the DIYmommy.com. While I always say you should decorate with things you absolutely love regardless of trends, I think following along with decor trends can be really fun, especially if you can recreate them on a budget with inexpensive supplies or, best case scenario, things you already have on hand. I've been loving all of the really warm, rustic, natural sort of trends I've been seeing this year, and I'm gonna recreate a few of them and give you some tips and tricks on how you can make them using inexpensive supplies as well. Let's get started. The first trend I want to try to DIY is a textured vase. I've been seeing these everywhere. I had this one that the brick gave me a few years ago, and it's not really my style. It's more of a modern vase with its really high gloss finish. So I had painted it with just one coat of chalk paint last year, I think, and then I never really used it for anything. So I wanted to try to give it a really textured finish. Now I've seen people make extremely textured paint with all kinds of additives like baking soda, plaster of Paris, even sanded grout, but I had this plaster of Paris on hand, and I'm also using this latex paint that I had on hand as well, and I'm gonna try to make a super textured paint with these materials. What I'm doing is I'm adding about half a cup of latex paint. I believe it's an eggshell sheen in a white color, and then I'm adding a little bit of plaster of Paris at a time. So to start, I added about a quarter cup of plaster of Paris, and you can see the consistency of my paint is kind of like maybe a pancake batter here, but I wanted to go for something even thicker to get this really plastery look that I wanted. So I added a little bit more plaster of Paris and I mixed everything up, and this is almost like maybe a bread dough consistency. So I ended up using about 1 part paint to 1 part plaster of Paris to make this extremely thick paint. Now you can make chalk style paint with a really similar method where you mix latex paint with plaster of Paris, but first you dissolve the plaster of Paris in some water to make sure that it's nice and smooth. I'm going to leave that tutorial down in the description box below. I do have that on my blog, but here I'm just adding the plaster of Paris right to the paint to give a really chunky look. Next, I'm taking a paintbrush. This is a chalk paintbrush from Annie Sloan that I've had for years, and I'm just coating the entire vase with 1 coat of paint. Next, I'm going ahead and adding even more paint and layering it onto this vase in a stippling motion. Now, if your vase didn't have any paint on it before, you might want to paint it once, let it dry for about 2 to 3 hours, and then do the stippling motion. You can definitely play with how you apply your paint. And look at this amazing texture I'm getting. The fun thing about this project is you don't want to go for perfection. We're going for an aged pottery sort of look. So just stipple away, glob away, get as much texture as you possibly can on your vase. I think a simple vase like this in a really simple shape is perfect for this project because the texture is going to be the star. Don't do what I did here and add on a layer of paint after your first layer has almost dried. You want to either work with all wet paint or let your first layer dry before you put another layer on. Here's how my vase looked after it's dried for a couple of hours. You can even see some cracks in here, which I think is perfect for this project. If you don't like those cracks, do a couple thin layers of paint rather than 1 thick layer. I also had this little sample of Fusion Mineral paint on hand in kind of this mushroom sort of color, a warm gray. And I'm going to do what's called dry brushing onto this vase to really make that texture pop. To dry brush, you're going to want to put your brush in paint and then remove any of the excess paint by stippling it onto a paper towel. Then go lightly over your piece as quickly and lightly as you can, just to get a very small amount of paint on it. This is going to really accent all of those textured elements that you have on this vase. If you accidentally put a little bit too much paint with this dry brushing method on one part, don't worry, there's a way to fix it, and I'm going to show that to you at the end. So if you accidentally put a little bit too much of your accent color through this dry brush technique, you can just take more of your original color of paint. In my case, it was just this white latex paint I had on hand. Take a little brush and paint over any of the darker parts. Again, you're not going for perfection here. You kind of want all of that texture and that gradation of color to really shine here. And here's how this textured vase turned out. I love it so much. It looks beautiful with some simple greenery or some faux branches for spring. The next trend I want to try is Japandi style. This is a cross between Japanese decor style and Scandinavian decor style. You might remember I used this old stool I found and turned it into a little footstool. I cut off a piece at the bottom and I'm going to use this piece for another little footstool. You can find these wooden stools in thrift stores all the time, and you can even find them in discount stores as well. Now I'm taking a sander and I'm sanding away at those little cut pieces on top, and then I decided to go ahead and sand the whole thing just to remove some of that shiny lacquer and that orange color. The thing about Japandi style is that natural woods really shine in this decor style. Scandinavian as well. You want as raw of a wood as you can, so that's why I'm trying to sand away at all of this finish. After that, I wiped down everything and I had this ball of macrame yarn on hand. You can use really any sort of string or yarn that you have at home. Even twine I think would work really well for this. I'm tying one of the sides to this side of the stool and just wrapping this whole thing around. Again, this natural look is really what sets the Japandi style apart. Simplicity as well. So I'm using this very simple square stool base, this very simple color of macrame yarn, and I want to just create a beautiful natural accent for my home. The thing about this DIY is you want to make sure that you wrap your twine or your yarn really tightly around the stool to make sure it has lots of tension. Once I got to the end of my stool, I'm just cutting the macrame cord and tying it at the end. You can either hot glue the ends and hide them underneath the yarn, or you can just kind of tuck them underneath like I'm doing here. This is such an easy DIY, and I love that I was able to upcycle something from another upcycle, so it's like a double upcycle, which I think is fantastic. This stool turned out really cute. It's such a simple accent, and I think it looks great in my living room by this chair. The next trend I want to try to DIY today is botanicals. Florals and vintage botanical prints are really trendy right now, and I've always loved them. I had these old frames. I think I got them from probably Walmart like 3-4 years ago, and I drew these little prints with a Sharpie, which are cute, but I want to retire them for now. I'm removing the back of the frames, the artwork, the mats, plus the glass. I do like to remove the glass for a little bit more of a natural look when I'm displaying my art. Again, I'm taking another sample that I got from Fusion Mineral Paints in this really beautiful green. I'm noticing that warm and natural colors are trending this year, and I've always loved these as well. This is a chalk style paint, so you don't need to prime or anything, plus it's really fun to distress. So after I applied 2 coats of this paint onto these frames, I'm taking the sanding sponge and going ahead and moving it over top of all of the edges of the frames. When you're distressing something like this, think about where natural wear and tear would take place on the item. So for these picture frames, on the edges, and especially in the corners, I want that original dark brown to show through to give these frames some more character. Now I want to show you my most favorite hack to find free vintage art online. Go to search.creativecommons.org and you can go ahead and search for your favorite style of art. So I'm searching for botanical painting. On the left-hand side, just toggle this CCO option. This is going to show you the royalty-free art that you can freely use and print at home. I love all of these vintage look botanicals. A lot of this art is from the 1800s, the 1900s, and I think it's so beautiful. I thought for spring it would be fun to find a daffodil painting, and I found the perfect botanical print right here. Once you find art that you love, you can just click on it. It's going to take you to the image's website, and then you can go ahead and save it to your computer from there. This one was from an 1804 botanical book, and I thought it was so pretty. I actually went ahead and downloaded 2 of the images from this book, and I put them on my blog, resized them for you to perfect 8x10s with crop marks that you can print at home. So I'll leave that link in the description box below if you like these ones and you want to print them. I printed them on regular letter-sized paper, and then I cut them down using those crop marks that I added. Finally, I placed these 2 prints inside the painted frames. I'm using the original mats from the frames and taping the paintings inside. I'm using command picture hanging strips to attach these to my wall. I think finding royalty-free vintage art, especially botanical art, is such a fun way to decorate your home for spring. Plus, it costs nothing at all if you use frames you have on hand and use paint you have on hand to upcycle them. The final trend I want to try is sculptural accents. I've been seeing lots of sculptural candles and candle holders and kind of like raw clay look items for your home. Now, this DIY was kind of a fail, but I'm going to talk you through how I would change this if I wasn't using things I had at home. I did want to use what I had on hand, but I'm going to recreate this sometime and buy the proper tools for it. I'm using Fimo Leather Effect clay for these, which I think was my first mistake. This clay, once you bake it, is a little bit bendy, and you want to use a polymer clay that hardens a bit more when you make these. So please, if you try these, just use regular polymer clay. I'm rolling 2 long pieces of my clay for one part of my candle holders, and then for the other parts, I'm cutting 2 rectangles. I'm using this gray color because I think it kind of looks raw like cement, which is something that I'm seeing a lot this year. I'm also cutting 2 rectangles to wrap around the base of my candle. I'm just using a taper candle to make sure that I have the right size and shape. I wrap it around the candle and kind of pinch that seam. Next, I'm pulling it off and just kind of pinching down and pushing down all of these raw edges. Now I'm pinching the bottom of this little candle holder part and pushing it down just like this to create the perfect holder shape for my taper candle. Now, using the cylinder pieces, I am cutting the ends off and kind of squishing one of them together to create an oval shape. I'm doing this again with the second cylinder shape, but I'm creating 2 oval shapes, one that's a little bit bigger than the other one. This was my second mistake. I wouldn't stack 2 ovals on top of each other for this project. It's just a little bit flimsy, so just stick to 1 oval for each of these candle holders. Now I'm going to bake all of these pieces at about 265 degrees Fahrenheit for about 40 minutes in my oven, but just follow the directions on the clay that you use. So all of these hardened pretty well, but again, I would just use regular polymer clay, not this more bendy, leathery clay for this project. You can take a sanding sponge and sand off anything that you don't want on your pieces. And now I'm going to put a brush in some plain black acrylic paint and kind of splatter all of these pieces to give them a really neat textured look. Now I'm using some rubber cement to put all of these pieces together. This was my mistake number 3. I should have used hot glue from the very beginning. I'm going to show you that at the end. So here I'm just taking the rubber cement and attaching my base piece to the first oval. I'm using some painter's tape to make sure everything is secure while it dries. I love how these are imperfect, which I'm seeing a lot of this year. I think that's such a fantastic trend in decor, especially if you love to make and DIY things. The imperfect has been praised, and I am so in love with that concept. So here's how my 2 candle holders look, all glued and stacked. Again, don't do 2 rings unless you have fantastic glue for this project, because you'll see in a second what happened to my 2-ring candle holder. Yeah, so this is what happened as soon as I put a candle in it. So all I did was I took my glue gun, I re-glued everything, only used 1 oval for each candle, and they actually turned out in the end, and I think they look really cute. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed these tutorials. Let me know down in those comments below which of these projects was your favorite and why. Or maybe how you would do them differently if you were to recreate these 2021 trends. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel for more DIY and decor ideas on a budget. I'm gonna leave some more videos that I hope you will love and watch next right up here.